Hello. It's Coach Ro. Yo. I'm not really sure how to introduce this yet. I haven't chosen. I am trying to think do I go really formal? Hello, this is Rocio Flores, and this is the Can I Just Be podcast. Or just kind of go with the flow and see whatever I'm feeling on any given day. We'll see. We'll see as this progresses. Today, I want to talk about talking. Talking in general, so conversations or communication that goes into building up relationships or the way we talk in relationships. So this weekend, I went to the speech and debate tournament at my old high school. And it's this event where we judge kids on their speeches and their debating, right? So the speech and debate. And in those events, there's just a ton of us who are all speech and debate kids. So we were all the forensics kids that were kind of, speech and debate kids. And it's always so much fun. I have so much fun every time we go because there's just this giant room filled with adults who are just sitting around talking about random ass stuff. It's so free to just talk. And I love it. But right off the bat, I started thinking this isn't how I generally talk in regular conversations. It's not generally how I am able to relate in regular life. And why is that? And so I was just, having thoughts about it, having thoughts about talking and in general, the way that I want to be able to talk with people and have conversations and have connections. So that's what I want to talk about today. It's how we have these conversations and how we connect with people and how we relate to people and how we communicate and the differences between those and just, that kind of thing. So let's get started. So when I was at the event, we were talking about random things and even things that some of them were important topics, right? We were talking about Gilmore Girls and about Rory and how, what we liked about her and what we didn't like about her and how her life ended up and what it meant and how it showed this and that, right? To talking about grapefruit juice or grape juice in general or stuff like that, random things. We were talking about ducks. We were talking about just talking. And what I've always liked about those events is I don't know everyone in that room. For the most part, I sit with my friends, but then somebody's having a conversation. I could just turn into that conversation and start sharing my opinion. The next person can start sharing theirs in our conversation. There's never this rule book of what in regular life, you can't just go up to somebody's conversation and start talking to them without being rude, with quotes on the rude. It's weird, or it's not socially as accepted to just kind of butt into a conversation. And yet it's something that we do a lot, online, right? It's the whole comment culture is that we are literally just commenting in on random conversations online. So that's a normal thing now online that is still very much not culturally and or societally, it's not within rules, right? So we don't have specific rules of what is or isn't correct, which is probably why online social media is so filled with mayhem, right? People avoid the comment section. People don't want to post their opinions sometimes, or they post their opinions and they really want to post their opinions. And we kind of generally see Facebook and social media as negative things, as negative parts of our society, rather than being a positive thing. And so I think of this weekend where people shared opinions and people shared thought processes and people talked about a lot of stuff that maybe online would not have gone as smoothly. And why is that? So another thing I noticed was the moment I got home, it wasn't like that anymore. It felt suddenly I had to fall back into, wait, what is the rule here with how I present this next topic of conversation? Now, I don't know if this is normal and this is something that happens for everyone, because I know that there are people out there who are incredibly open and just have a really easy time talking and just talking with anyone about anything. And they're not afraid to say the wrong thing. They're not afraid to follow any specific rules or to break rules. They just are, which is awesome. That's the level of confidence I want to be at. That's the level of life I want to live. I want to just speak without thinking and just not ever care. But I also like want to have relationships, right? Like I want to have friends. I want to have people with whom I can talk to, because a lot of those people who are like, I don't give a damn, I'm just gonna say what I want to say, you know, we know sometimes we don't like them. You know, they're the people that we don't want to spend too much time with, or they're the people that get talked about the moment they walk away. Like, that was weird, or, you know, why did he think that was okay to say, or ugh, I hate this person, oh my god, this person's coming by, shh, don't be quiet, don't say nothing. You know, that's at least my experience. And sometimes I'm like, am I just around a lot of shitty people, or it's just normal? You know, I like in all sorts of walks of life, from family to friends to school to non-school to church to non-church to just in general, I've seen people of all walks of life have very strong opinions about people who have strong opinions. And so why is it so hard for us to be okay with just talking? And why is it so hard for us to say what we want to say without also breaking a bunch of other societal? I personally have noticed that in my relationships, because of the nature of my work and because of just kind of the role I play in my life, like a good amount of my relationships, a good amount of my conversations are supportive, meaning that the person I'm talking to is telling me what their issue is, and it's not up for discussion. So I'm not sitting around theorizing on the workings of this idea of the problem of like blah 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 blah. Like, we're not sitting around philosophizing, how would you say that? I don't know. Like, we're not sitting around thinking about thinking. It's all action based. I, as a coach, my job is to take what you've told me, use that information to help you figure out what the next step is that you want to do. And so I may ask questions, I may ask to bring up perspectives. I am thinking about what you're saying, what it's communicating to me, and how I can communicate to you what you're communicating to me, so that you're able to then use the information and that perspective to then move forward and do whatever you need to do next, right? That's a lot of what coaching is. It's not two people just sitting around talking like best buds. And let me just insert right here that I also think personal development is very, very much predicated on that same concept. We're not reading books about thinking about self-esteem like they are action-based. They're not up for discussion. It says you want to have self-esteem, you want to be better at saying no, you want to have boundaries, you want to be more confident, make more money, build a business. It's all about action. Like, this is what you do moving forward. Very few books are okay to just discuss, where we're just sitting around thinking about thinking. But that's the thing, in a lot of other conversations where we have friendships, you know, I know this isn't just me, because I've had conversations about this with my own friends, where a whole lot of our conversations, especially if you're somebody who falls into that supportive role, like if you're a mom or a daughter or a friend, or you just play these roles where you are the emotional connection for someone, you're the person who's there to support the person. A lot of the times, these conversations and these relationships become very one-sided. And this is actually something that I have to help people with through work, because a lot of them are struggling with this, where they don't feel like they're connecting with the people in their life, because all they're really ever doing is being there for the people in their life, and no one's being there for them. While I know that I'm not the only person who has this experience, I also know just how difficult it is to change it. And there are ways to change that. So that within itself, there is like a level of what is considered healthy communication and what's not healthy communication. And there are ways to address that, in the sense that, for example, you learn how to set boundaries, you learn how to set limitations on what you are and aren't okay, and understanding what your limitations are as far as how often you're open to being that person for someone and being that, playing that role, or how to communicate yourself when you require somebody to be a place of support for you. And all of that is good. I teach people how to do that all the time. This is something that I've actively had to work on in my own life, because it's actually really hard to live the entirety of your life never having been supported and always having to be somebody else's support system. That is not an equal life. It is not healthy. While it might carry like a moral highness to it, you know, like somebody's like, oh my God, they're so nice. Or, you know, they're the person I go to, but it's not healthy. You do need that back and forth. You need to be able to be the person who gives support, but also be the person who gets support. And venting and asking for advice are both things that are just part of our daily lives, and they're normal and they're healthy when in healthy limits or in healthy amounts. But I'm not talking about making more of our relationships equal in that sense. I'm talking about how hard it is to just sit around and talk without it being where we are seeking support, seeking advice, or venting, where there's a give and take on ideas. Once upon a time, people sat around and just talked about things, like random things, and came up with ideas and theories about life, and we called it philosophy, and people got very famous over it. And I don't know how, right? Like, we do not value philosophy in today's world. We make fun of people who went to school for philosophy. We do not see them as being that smart because while they may be book smart, right? We say that, well, they're not street smart. They are dumb for choosing a liberal, you know, degree that's never going to get them a job. So we judge them very harshly. Anybody who has an aptitude or a passion or desire for thinking. When back in the day, like literally the reason society is where society is because so many people just sat around thinking. And obviously life was different then. The opportunity for us to actually spend time analyzing and thinking was very different. And there's a really good chance that it was exactly the same as today, as in only a very, very small percentage of people actually sat around thinking, right? Like there were people whose job, like Plato was one dude teaching like one other dude, right? Like it wasn't like the people working and the people who were building stuff and the people who were actually doing the nitty-gritty parts of society. You know, it was the elite, right? Or, you know, we like to think of like the downtrodden person who had all these ideas, and like once they died, these ideas became famous and they advanced society, and they deserve to be famous and known and loved. But we're just, you know, we're not that good. We're just sitting around and talking about random stuff. Like there's no importance in us doing it because it's not like we're philosophers, you know, we're not worthy of being that or playing that role. And so we don't value it. But like we value sharing our opinions. That's something we want to do. Like, which is weird to me because we will do anything we can to share our opinion online. Like we will go out of our way if it means being rude, being a jerk, if it means not liking the people in our lives. Like, I mean, we will do whatever we can to share our opinion. But we don't value thinking in general, right? Like we don't value sitting around just having a genuine discussion. Like everyone talks about how that's like an ideal versus something that's very easily done if we just sit and talk. And so like this weekend, people were just, you know, we were in between rounds and we weren't doing anything. So we're just talking, and there was no expectation of being right or wrong. There was no expectation of me changing someone's mind. I wasn't in any way, like I wasn't thinking of like, if I say this will lead them to think this. It was just talking, just straight up talking. And it was just continuing. And while this does happen, and I know like it should happen in friendships, right? Like that's usually when we have friends, that's sort of the purpose, you know, to just be able to share yourself and share what you think and not have to worry about whether or not you're going to say the right or wrong thing. Yet I'm seeing that in my life, it's been a big issue, and in a lot of people's lives, it's a big issue. Lots of people come to me with this issue, that they don't feel connected. They don't feel like they can be themselves. They don't feel like the people in their life care or want to hear them out. Have you ever shared something, like somebody says something about juice, so you start saying, hey, I wonder how they make juice. And suddenly you bring on the wrath of like everyone around you. It's like, why do you care about juice? Maybe you shouldn't be thinking about juice so much. juice isn't good for you. Don't you know that juice is blah, 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 blah. Next thing you know, you're like quiet, because what was the purpose of sharing what you were saying? Like, why did it matter that you spoke in the first place? There are literally memes about this. And this is why I also think that if you're on social media, you should be following meme pages, because meme pages, literally memes are commentary on our society. They're commentary on the realities of our world, right? And when we avoid memes because they're childish, or like only, what are they, Gen X or Gen Y or whatever? Like if it's only the young people who are able to understand memes, what you're saying is that only young people are able to understand society. Like, how can we call ourselves smart as older people? How can we say that in general, a person who's older is wiser? If the moment you're older, you are just completely closed off to anything anyone younger than you has to say. And if you're closed off to anything that's new, how can you even understand what society is as it is now? Like, you're only understanding life from your perspective up until that point, and not the perspectives that are coming. And you know, you hear about people who are like famous or rich or whatever, and who are like, I saw this coming. Like, I saw people starting to do this, and I knew that people were gonna need this. And so then they create the next new program, the next website, the next whatever. And those are the people who had like an insight into how people actually think and process and make decisions. And so then they made money off of it. And yet we devalue it so much to care about the way society thinks. Like, we are not okay with people sharing their opinions or just sharing their thoughts. We're not okay with people just sitting around talking, because that's just wasting time, right? Like, you should be making money, you should be cleaning, you should be cooking, you should be doing anything but living. Okay, so now let me get into my rant about entertainment. I mean, TV's fun. In general, reading is, I like reading, I guess. I know not everyone likes reading, but that's entertainment. YouTube, online, social media, pictures, movies, everything that we do in today's society that's not work or work-based activities. So, for example, when I go to therapy, they make me do this little like sort of like a test or a survey asking me how I'm doing, and in the top it says, because it's gonna ask questions about how well you've been doing at work, how well you've been, things like that, right? Like how well you've been managing. And it says work includes anything that you do as part of like your job, but also things like school, cleaning, cooking, basically things where you're producing, you're doing something that's basically something you got to do, right? So when we're not working and we're not sleeping, we're entertaining ourselves, right? Like, there's not many other options. We're either entertaining ourselves or we're connecting with other people. But that is a huge critique on today's society, the fact that we are not connecting with people that much anymore. Like, I don't want to say social media is bad, because I don't think that that's the right response, because obviously what it's done is actually allowed for a lot of people to be able to connect, people that would otherwise not connect in any way. Like, I talk to people from other sides of the country. Like, I talk to people in groups that are incredibly precisely about specific interests that I know I would have no one to talk to about that in real life. So social media is not so much the issue. I think the issue is that the people who don't like it are online, right? It's the people who, there's always going to be somebody who like doesn't want us to spend our time doing what we want to do. And it sucks. And sometimes we're those people. Sometimes we're like, what the hell? Why do people talk about this? Or why, we have just feelings, I guess. Whatever makes us uncomfortable just suddenly becomes the thing that we don't think is okay for people to like want. And I guess it's one thing to feel that, it's another thing to put it out there into the world, where it's going to affect how somebody then decides whether or not they're going to continue. And that goes into my next point. How do I explain this without being problematic? Let's see. It's the weekend, the week of after the Super Bowl, and there's a lot of controversy about it, right? I'm sure you've all seen it at this point. And that's the same thing that happens after any major event, any major performance, pretty much anybody talking that anybody saw. If there's enough people seeing something, there's going to be some sort of conversation about it. But man, is the conversation freaking negative. Like, nobody can just say something. It's like all or nothing. And how dare they do this, and how dare they do that, and it makes you mad. But we're choosing to do that. Like, we are making a decision that we want to talk about this subject. And instead of just talking about it and then letting ourselves just talk about it, we now feel like we have to talk about this subject. Like, we have to affirm what we are saying. It can't just be a passing thought. No, it is a judgment. It is commentary. It is an opinion. It is fact, right? And so it becomes this huge issue where it no longer is just talking. Like, we can't just have a conversation. Like, we are hating each other because of it. I know I have that feeling. I know a lot of people have that feeling. It's pretty normal, right? It's almost as if we are so uncomfortable with just thinking that we have to make it something else because it's different, right? Just theorizing or sitting around, philosophizing. I mean, that is not okay, right? Because it's not productive. We live in a society where productive things are the only things that matter, and non-productive things are not things that matter. And we can't just sit around thinking. It has to have a purpose. And so then any commentary or any thought analysis we have has to be framed in the sense of judgment, opinion, fact. So we're either saying something because we have to say it because it's a fact, or we're saying something because it's our opinion, and we're not sharing our opinion just for the sake of sharing our opinions, because our opinion matters and it will change other people's opinions. And obviously people are going to judge that and use that judgment to then share their opinion or, fixate on fact, which is more on my end. I'm over here like, but that's like, you can't just say that's a fact when it's not a fact. So, we all do it, but why couldn't we just talk? Like, why do we have to share everything as all or nothing? Like, this is what I think, instead of just thinking. I'm hoping that makes sense. What I'm trying to get at is that, when we talk about like philosophy, or I don't know if y'all ever have taken like classes where they talk about that stuff, or maybe just heard about it. So much of what we were taught wasn't taught in the sense that this is fact. It also wasn't taught in like, this was Plato's opinion about this. It was more like, he theorized that this could be the way things are. And then this guy theorized that this is the way things could be. What's the difference between those two? And how do we go about using both of these ideas to understand our world, right? Like, the idea wasn't to care or not care that this specific guy had this specific opinion. It wasn't like when we learned about Hitler and we're like, oh, he had that opinion. Ooh, that opinion made a difference. Like, it was more along the lines of, how does this idea, or how does this thought process change your thought process? And it was enjoyable in the sense that it just changes the way we think. It changes the way we allow ourselves to think about the next moment, the next step, the next thing that we then do have to genuinely have an opinion on, right? So in our daily decisions, when we go out to do the work, right, the productive stuff, we work based off of facts and opinions. So what's fact is fact. If I step in front of a car, that car's probably gonna hurt me. So you can't, in that moment, theorize about a lot. You have to just know whether or not something will or won't happen because it's a matter of fact, or you have to make a decision based on a matter of opinion. But outside of that work that has very specific consequences, where is the room for us to feel safe enough to not have to have an opinion, to not have to make a decision, where we could just think and work on making our brains better at that thinking, so that then we are able to make better decisions, make better observations, and actually understand things well enough that we can understand the difference between fact and opinion and be able to stand firm in our opinions. I have one friend who is really awesome because that's what we do. We just talk. I've never felt the need to compel her to think in a certain way. I've never felt the need to share my opinion above my thought process of that opinion. You know, I have my own opinions, but it's not what matters in the moment, because we're not making a decision based on an opinion. We're just talking about it because what if I'm wrong? Like, what if she's wrong? What if we're thinking about guns and I right off the bat, I'm like, this is my opinion and this is what I'm going to assert right now. Instead of being like, so I wonder, you know, people who think this way, I wonder if they're making a decision because of this. Or, so I wonder what happens if this was the case, but then this happened. Like, it's that thinking that allows us to actually process our beliefs. It allows us to process our doubts. It allows us to think about how we want to think about a certain issue moving forward. And I think it's something that we're severely lacking in general. Like, it's very hard to find places where it's safe to just think. So we do our thinking on our own. And I don't know about you, I don't know how much you are aware of how bad our brain is at thinking by itself. In my work, I have to constantly talk and teach and kind of remind people about like cognitive distortions and how, like, I mean, we all do it. We all have this kind of, like, our brain likes to take shortcuts. Our brain likes to think if A happens, B happens. But logic only really works with things that are clearly only logic based, right? So just because our brain says, yep, this happens because of this, doesn't mean that that's the way it is. So just because a person didn't smile at you does not mean that they're mad at you, even though your brain's used to thinking smile equals happy and not smile equals not happy. There's just so many other factors because we're humans. We are not robots. And so our thinking isn't always very clear. And so our brain just creates these shortcuts and we can live a life that is completely just sucky. It just sucks. It's just horrible because we take our brain at face value. Like, we believe our brain just said that person looks mad. They must be mad at me. I must have done something wrong. I hate myself. Right? And you go from suddenly you're not talking to anybody, suddenly you don't trust anybody, suddenly you don't have a life that you enjoy because you believed your brain. Because your brain sucks. It can be really awesome, but it also can suck a lot. And that's why we communicate, right? Like, if it was possible for us to all just live in our own brains, that's how we would be. But that's not how we're set up. Like, whether you believe in evolution or you believe in creation, neither of those teach that we were meant to be isolated, that we were meant to be alone, that we don't need other people. Both of them heavily teach that our survival depends on our connections with other people. And we are slowly fading away from that ideal because we are believing our brain's isolated thoughts about how we don't need anyone else. God doesn't say that to us. And it makes it really hard once you're in that isolation to break out of it. So it just becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy where, like, you just make bad things happen because we think bad things and bad things just continue. So, like, kind of a secret, but if you don't want to believe in, like, the law of attraction, think of it of you just making things happen. So how do we address this? I guess what I'm wanting to do is create and find and be okay with more opportunities where I'm allowed to just be and talk and nurture those relationships. So when I notice that somebody who is cool with that, who's able to just kind of talk without it being such a big issue, that's a relationship I have to choose to prioritize. And places and situations that allow for that are things that I need to prioritize, even when it's not that convenient. It's not always convenient to step out of my comfort zone and say, I'm not gonna chill right now, I'm not gonna watch TV right now, or I'm not gonna be on my phone right now, and step outside of that and communicate and actually try and connect with the people around me. I know that I freaking struggle with that. Like, I'm incredibly anxious. It just becomes this big, huge issue in my head. But it will always be that issue unless I try to make it not an issue. So it's a choice that I have to make. But I think also, like, society-wise, right? We have to somehow find a way to allow for the creation of these events. So maybe you guys have ideas. We can come up with that kind of stuff. Like, like, I have my little Facebook group, and I'm like, I'm gonna make that kind of place. I want it to just be like a safe place for connection and for people to just be who they are, so that they can then go out to other places in the world and be able to do that. If you guys know of other groups where you feel like that's really the way that it goes, and even if we have to just start online because that's just our world now, then maybe that's what we gotta do. So tell me what you guys think, or just start doing it. Allow for people to just talk without it having to be such a big deal. And step back and think about what you decide to share. Because it's very easy to just do what everyone else is doing and just be angry. And that's our world. But we get to change our world because we are the world, right? So yeah, that's what's been on my mind lately. And yeah, I have not come up with an ending, like an outro for this either. So you guys can give me ideas, or I'll come up with something as soon as it comes to my mind, and I'll do it. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it if you got all the way to this ending. And if you like this, please share it with anybody who you think might also like it. And have a wonderful, blessed day. Goodbye.